The crimson sun of Asarii bled across the horizon as Kalari crouched on a high branch, her predatory eyes scanning the jungle floor below. The humid air clung to her bronze skin like a second garment, but she remained motionless, a statue carved from shadow and purpose. For 3 days, she had tracked this prey. For 3 days, he had evaded her. It was unthinkable. She had never failed a hunt. From her first kill at the age of 12 to her 14th sanctioned hunt just 3 moons ago, every target had fallen to her blade within hours. The matron spoke of her with reverence, calling her the pride of the Blood Moon clan. Young hunters whispered her name with awe. The elders nodded knowingly when they saw her pass, already envisioning the day she would complete her 15th hunt and ascend to become their youngest matron in 5 generations. But this man, this outsider who should have been dead within minutes of entering her territory, continued to breathe, continued to run, continued to defy the natural order of Asarii. Ethan Voss. The name tasted foreign on her tongue when the council had spoken it during the ceremony. A soldier from Earth's failed expedition, they said, left behind when his people retreated from their foolish attempt to colonize Asarii. Weak, soft, an insult to give her as a final hunt. Or so she had thought. The jungle whispered around her, its ancient voice carrying secrets in the rustling leaves. Vasariai's forests were not mere collections of trees and vines. They were alive in ways Earthborn could never comprehend, watching, judging, remembering. Every hunter knew this truth, felt it in their bones when they moved through the green depths. The jungle chose who lived and who died as much as any blade. A crack echoed through the canopy, not the natural settling of wood or the scurry of prey, but the deliberate snap of a branch under careful foot. Kalari's muscles coiled like springs, her hand moving to the ceremonial dagger at her hip. The blade had tasted 14 lives, each death marking another step toward her destiny. Soon it would taste its 15th, and she would stand before the council complete. She dropped from her perch, landing silently on the spongy undergrowth. Her trained senses picked apart the layers of jungle noise, isolating the foreign rhythm of human movement. There, 40 paces ahead, moving through a thicket of crimson ferns. She could hear his labored breathing, smell the sharp tang of earthborn sweat mixed with fear. The hunt was sacred. The kill was art. She moved like water through shadow, each step calculated to minimize sound, each breath controlled to blend with the forest's natural rhythm. Her people had perfected this dance over millennia, turning death into devotion, violence into virtue. The 15th hunt was not merely about killing. It was about proving one's complete mastery over life itself. She circled wide, using the natural concealment of the jungle to position herself ahead of his path. The ground here was softer, marked by the recent rains that turned soil to mud. Perfect for reading tracks, perfect for an ambush. She settled behind a massive root system, her body melding with the shadows cast by the ancient trees. The footsteps grew closer. She could make out details now. The slight limp in his left leg from their first encounter, the way he favored his right side where her blade had kissed his ribs 2 days ago. He was weakening. The jungle was taking its toll, as it did on all outsiders who dared trespass in its depths. 20 paces. 10. 5. She exploded from cover, her blade singing through the air in a perfect arc meant to open his throat. But instead of soft flesh, her dagger met empty space. Her momentum carried her forward into a roll as something whistled past her ear and thudded into a tree behind her. A crude spear, fashioned from jungle wood and tipped with sharpened stone. She spun to face him, and for the first time in 3 days, truly saw her prey. Ethan Voss stood 10 paces away, another makeshift weapon already in hand. His earth-green uniform was torn and stained, his face gaunt from days without proper food, his brown hair matted with sweat and dirt. But his eyes held something she had never seen in any of her previous hunts. Not fear, not resignation, not even defiance. Understanding. "You're getting predictable," he said, his voice rough from dehydration but steady. 3 days of the same patterns. You circle left when the wind shifts, attack from downwind when it's steady. You favor high ground in the morning, low ground in the evening. Your breathing changes exactly 2 heartbeats before you strike. The words hit her like physical blows. Impossible. No prey had ever studied her, analyzed her, turned her own methods against her. They ran, they hid, they fought in desperation, but they never learned. They never adapted. You know nothing, earthborn, she snarled, but the words felt hollow. Her grip on her dagger shifted subtly, betraying her uncertainty. I know you're not used to prey that thinks, he continued, slowly backing toward denser cover. Your whole system is based on hunting creatures driven by instinct. When was the last time someone actually challenged you? Made you work for it? She launched herself at him, a blur of motion honed by years of training. Her blade carved intricate patterns through the air, each strike flowing into the next in a deadly dance. But he wasn't there, always a half step ahead, always just beyond her reach. Not running in panic, but moving with purpose, leading her somewhere. The realization came too late. Her foot caught on a concealed vine, sending her tumbling forward. She rolled with the fall, coming up in a defensive crouch, but he was already moving. Not toward her for an attack, but past her, toward the steep ravine she had been herded toward. First lesson of Earth military training. He called back, disappearing into the green. Never fight on your enemy's terms. She stood at the edge of the ravine, watching him navigate the treacherous descent with surprising skill. Her pride burned hotter than the Vasariai's sun. 14 perfect hunts, 14 clean kills, and now this outsider dared to lecture her? To make her look the fool? The council's words echoed in her mind. The 15th hunt must be completed within 5 days, or your name will be stricken from the scrolls of honor. This is the way. 3 days gone, 2 remaining. She pursued him down the ravine, her superior knowledge of the terrain allowing her to close the distance. But each time she drew near, he had another surprise. A deadfall trap that nearly crushed her. A false trail that led her into a nest of stinging insects. A river crossing where he had somehow rigged the current to sweep away anyone following his exact path. By nightfall of the 4th day, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about hunting. This was not the sacred art she had been taught. This was something else entirely. Something that required not just physical prowess and instinct, but cunning adaptation, thinking 3 moves ahead like the strategic games the elders played in the common halls. She tracked him to a cave system she knew well, a labyrinth of passages that had claimed many lives over the generations. The darkness inside was absolute, the kind that seemed to have weight and presence. She paused at the entrance, her hunter's instincts screaming warnings. Afraid of the dark? His voice echoed from somewhere deep within, distorted by the stone passages until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. I fear nothing, she replied, but her hand hesitated before entering the blackness. This was his trap, obviously, but with time running out, what choice did she have? She entered the caves, moving by touch and sound alone. The passages twisted and branched, some ending in dead ends, others opening into vast chambers where the slightest sound echoed endlessly. She had hunted here before, but always with the advantage of preparation, always knowing her prey was more afraid of the dark than she was. Hours passed in the blackness. Several times she was sure she had him cornered, only to find empty air. Once, she felt his presence, so close she could hear his breathing, but when she struck, her blade found only stone. He was playing with her, using the darkness as a weapon. Then, suddenly light, a soft green glow emanating from around a bend in the passage. She approached cautiously, every sense alert for another trap. What she found instead made her stop and wonder. The chamber was filled with phosphorescent fungi, casting everything in an ethereal glow. And there, sitting calmly in the center of this natural cathedral, was Ethan Voss. His makeshift spear lay beside him, not in a position of threat, but almost ceremonially placed. He was sketching something in the soft sand of the cave floor. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said without looking up. "Your people call this the Chamber of First Light." According to your histories, this is where the first hunt began, where your ancestors learned to see in the dark. How do you know this? She demanded, her blade still ready, but her curiosity overriding her caution. I pay attention, he replied simply. Your hunting parties talk when they think no one's listening. Your ceremonies are full of symbolism if you know how to interpret it. Your entire culture is written in the language of the hunt. He looked up at her then, and in the soft green light, she saw something that shook her to her core. He wasn't just surviving her hunt. He was studying her culture, understanding it, perhaps even respecting it. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why make this so difficult? You could have run deeper into the jungle, tried to reach the old Earth settlements. Why stay in my territory? Why face me? He stood slowly, deliberately making no threatening moves. Because running would just delay the inevitable. Your people would send another hunter, then another. But facing you, learning from you, turning your own methods back on you, that gives me a chance. Not just to survive, but to make you think. Think about what? She found herself lowering her blade slightly, drawn into this strange conversation despite herself. About why you hunt. About what it really means to be strong. About whether following tradition blindly makes you a master or a slave. The words were heresy, the kind that would earn instant death if spoken in the council chambers. But here, in this sacred place where her people's history began, they resonated with something deep inside her. You know nothing of our ways, she said, but the conviction was gone from her voice. The hunt is sacred. The 15 kills mark our passage into leadership. It has always been so. Has it? He gestured to the walls of the chamber, and for the first time, she noticed the markings there. Ancient pictographs she had never paid attention to before. Look closer. Tell me what you see. Against every instinct, she moved past him to examine the walls. The images were faded with age, but still visible in the fungal light. They showed hunters, yes, but not as she knew them. These ancient figures were shown, teaching, building, protecting. The kills they made were of beasts, not people. And in the final panel, a figure remarkably similar to herself stood before a choice. A raised blade in one hand, an open palm in the other. The 15th hunt wasn't always about killing, Ethan said softly. It was about choosing. The final test wasn't whether you could take a life, but whether you knew when not to. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. How had her people forgotten? When had the ritual been corrupted, turned from wisdom into mere violence? How did you know? She whispered. I didn't, he admitted, but I studied your language, your customs. The word you use for hunt, in its oldest form, also means to seek understanding. The symbol for kill is nearly identical to the one for choose. Your ancestors understood something your people have forgotten. The sound of footsteps echoed through the caves. Many footsteps. The council had come, as tradition demanded, to witness the completion of her final hunt. She could hear the voices of the matrons, the whispered excitement of younger hunters who had followed to watch their champion claim her place among the leadership. They're here, she said unnecessarily. I know. He made no move to run or defend himself. The question is, what will you choose? She looked at him, this impossible man who had turned her world upside down in 4 days. He had defeated her not with strength or speed, but with something far more dangerous, truth. The footsteps grew closer. Soon the chamber would fill with witnesses. Whatever choice she made would define not just her own fate, but possibly the future of her people's traditions. I should kill you, she said, raising her blade. It's what's expected, what's required. Yes, he agreed simply. You should. The first of the witnesses entered the chamber, elder matron Thessera at their head. The old woman's face was carved from years of certainty, her eyes holding the weight of tradition. Kalari, the elder matron intoned, the time has come. Complete your hunt and take your place among us. She felt the weight of expectation like a physical thing. 14 perfect hunts, a lifetime of training, the pride of her clan. Everything she had worked for led to this moment. She looked at Ethan, who stood calmly awaiting his fate. No fear in his eyes, only that damnable understanding. as if he saw into her very soul and knew what she would choose before she did. Her blade rose higher, catching the green light of the fungi. The ceremonial words began to form on her lips, the ritual phrases that accompanied every killing blow. Around her, the witnesses leaned forward in anticipation. Then she saw it again, the ancient pictograph on the wall, the figure with the choice, blade or open hand, death or something else. The dagger moved in a swift arc. The witnesses gasped. The blade sank deep into the sandy floor of the chamber, buried to its hilt. "I choose understanding," Kalari said, her voice ringing through the chamber. "I choose to seek rather than simply to kill. I choose to honor what our ancestors truly meant, not what we've corrupted it into." The silence was deafening. Elder Matron Thesara's face cycled through shock, rage, and something else, perhaps fear. "You reject the hunt." The words came out as a hiss. "You refuse your destiny." "I complete it," Kalari replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "But not as you've defined it. Look at the walls. See what we've forgotten." The 15th choice was never about killing. It was about wisdom, about knowing when. Death serves no purpose. Heresy, another matron spat. Tradition cannot be questioned. You disgrace us all. "I honor our true tradition," Kalari countered, "not the shadow it's become." The council huddled together, their whispers harsh and angry. She knew what was coming before they spoke it. "Kalari of the Blood Moon clan," Elder Matron Thesera announced, her voice dripping with contempt. "You have failed your final hunt. You have rejected our ways. By the ancient laws, you're cast out. Your name will be stricken from all records. You exist no more in the eyes of the people." The words should have crushed her. Everything she had trained for, everything she had believed in, stripped away in an instant. But instead, she felt something else. Lightness. Freedom. As if chains she hadn't known she wore had suddenly fallen away. "So be it," she said simply. The witnesses filed out, none meeting her eyes. To them, she was already dead, a ghost that happened to still draw breath. Only Elder Matron Thesera lingered. "You could have been the greatest among us," the old woman said, and was there regret in her voice? "Why throw it all away for an outsider?" Kalari looked at Ethan, then back at the elder. "Because he showed me something I had never considered, that there might be more than one way to be strong, more than one path to honor." Thesera shook her head sadly and turned to go. But the chamber's entrance, she paused. "The jungle will not be kind to outcasts," she said without turning. "But then, it has always had its own way of choosing who belongs." And then they were alone. The phosphorescent fungi pulsed gently, casting shifting patterns of light across the ancient walls. Outside the caves, she could hear the sound of the hunting party retreating, taking with them her old life, her old identity. "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "I did. For the first time in my life, I made a real choice. Not what tradition demanded, not what others expected, but what I believed was right." "What happens now?" he asked. She retrieved her dagger from the sand, wiping it clean before sheathing it. The blade felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of 14 deaths had been lifted from it. "Now we survive," she said. "The jungle is vast, and the clans control only a small part of it. There are places they never go, old settlements, forgotten outposts. We'll find somewhere to start again." He raised an eyebrow. "You've seen too much, learned too much about our ways. They'll never let you leave alive. And she paused, then smiled, surprised to find she could smile. "I have nowhere else to go. Besides, you still have much to teach me about thinking like prey. And perhaps I have things to teach you about surviving in Vasarii." They left the cave together, emerging into the perpetual twilight of the deep jungle. The air was thick with moisture and the calls of night hunters. But something was different. The forest, which had always been her ally, didn't feel hostile. If anything, it seemed almost welcoming, as if approving of her choice. They traveled for days, moving deeper into regions even the most experienced hunters rarely ventured. Ethan proved surprisingly adaptable, learning to read the jungle's moods, to spot edible plants and avoid the countless hazards that claimed unwary travelers. In return, he shared stories of Earth, of technologies and philosophies that seemed like magic to someone raised in a tradition-bound society. On Earth, he said one evening as they sheltered beneath a massive fern tree, we have a saying, question everything, accept nothing on faith alone. That would be considered dangerous thinking among my people, she replied, then corrected herself. My former people. All the best thinking is dangerous to someone, he said with a grin. They found on the seventh day an old research station from the first Earth expedition, long abandoned but still partially functional. Solar panels continued to collect energy from Vasari's twin suns, and the water recycling system still worked. It wasn't much, just a cluster of prefab buildings slowly being reclaimed by the jungle, but it was shelter. It was a beginning. Months passed. They learned to work together, combining their skills to create something neither could have achieved alone. Ethan repaired what technology he could, creating simple tools and devices that made survival easier. Kalari taught him the deeper secrets of the jungle, the subtle signs that meant the difference between life and death. And slowly, carefully, they built something else. Trust, understanding, connection. It started with shared meals and necessary cooperation. It grew through long conversations under the alien stars, discussions about philosophy, tradition, the nature of strength and honor. She told him about her childhood, the brutal training that had shaped her into a weapon. He shared memories of Earth, of a family lost in the corporate wars that had driven humanity to seek new worlds. The day she realized she loved him came as a shock. She was watching him work on a water purification system. His face creased in concentration, and suddenly knew that she would fight the entire council of matrons to protect him. Not from duty or obligation, but from a feeling she had been taught to see as weakness. When she told him, he smiled and touched her face gently. I've known for weeks, he said. I was just waiting for you to question that particular tradition too. Their first child was born during the season of red rains, when the jungle canopy turned crimson and the air itself seemed to glow. They named her Arya, a name from Earth meaning melody, because her first cry harmonized perfectly with the singing of the rain on leaves. Arya grew up straddling two worlds, learning earth sciences and Vasari woodcraft with equal enthusiasm. She was faster than her father, more analytical than her mother, a perfect blend of both heritages. When she was old enough to understand, they told her the story of how they met, how choice had triumphed over tradition. Were you scared? Arya asked her mother one evening as they watched the twin sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. When you put down the knife? Kalari considered the question carefully. Terrified, she admitted, everything I had ever known told me I was making a mistake. But sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. The other hunters, do they still see you as dead? Probably. But look around you, little one. Do I seem dead to you? Arya laughed, the sound bright in the gathering dusk. No, Mama. You seem more alive than anyone. Their isolation didn't last forever. Other outcasts found them, drawn by rumors of a place where old traditions held less sway. A young hunter who had questioned the wisdom of the blood rites. A scholar who had been exiled for teaching forbidden histories. Families who wanted their children to grow up free from the rigid constraints of clan law. Within a decade, their small settlement had grown into a community. They called it Haven, and it became a bridge between worlds. Earth knowledge and Vasari wisdom merged in ways neither culture had imagined possible. They developed new methods of living with the jungle rather than merely surviving in it. They created art that blended human and native techniques. They raised children who could think as well as hunt, who questioned everything and accepted only what proved true. Kalari became their unofficial leader, not through conquest or killing, but through wisdom earned by choosing the harder path. She established new traditions, including a coming-of-age ceremony that honored the original meaning of the 15th hunt, a quest for understanding, not blood. The clans, of course, noticed. Hunting parties would sometimes pass near Haven's borders, careful not to trespass, but clearly observing. Messages came, unsigned but in familiar hands, asking about life beyond tradition's boundaries. Young hunters began to disappear from the clans, only to appear at Haven's gates seeking a different way. Elder Matron Thessera came herself in Kalari's 15th year of exile. The old woman stood at the edge of Haven's clearing, technically not trespassing, but clearly seeking parley. Kalari met her alone, as tradition demanded. "You've built something here," Thessera said without preamble. Her hair had gone completely white, her face mapped with new lines, but her eyes remained sharp. "We've built it together," Kalari corrected. "All of us who chose thinking over blind obedience." "The young ones speak of this place in whispers," Thessera continued. "They question the old ways. They ask why the 15th hunt demands blood when the oldest writings speak of choice. You've changed things, even from exile." "Truth has a way of surviving," Kalari replied, "even when we try to bury it under centuries of misunderstanding." Thessera was quiet for a long moment, studying the buildings of Haven, the mixed groups of humans and Vasarii working together, the children playing games that would have been forbidden in clan territories. "I came to tell you that the council is reconsidering the meaning of the 15th hunt," she said finally. "Some of the younger matrons have been studying the old texts, the chamber writings you spoke of. Change comes slowly to our people, but it comes." "And what do you think?" Kalari asked. The old woman's stern facade cracked slightly, revealing something almost like pride. "I think perhaps I trained you too well. You learn not just to hunt, but to question. Not just to kill, but to choose. Perhaps that was the true lesson all along, and I was too bound by tradition to see it." She turned to go, then paused. "Your name has been restored to the scrolls of honor, not as one who failed the hunt, but as one who completed it in its truest form. The first in generations to understand what our ancestors really meant." After Thessera left, Kalari stood for a long time at the border of Haven, thinking about the circular nature of truth, how it could be lost and found and lost again, but never truly destroyed. The jungle rustled around her, its ancient voice carrying whispers of approval. That evening, as the community gathered for their communal meal, Arya asked her mother to tell the story again of the hunt that changed everything. Kalari smiled and began the tale, but this time she noticed other children listening too, clan-born youngsters who had found their way to Haven, seeking something their traditions couldn't provide. "Once," she began, "I was the deadliest hunter on this world. I had 14 perfect kills and thought strength meant never questioning, never hesitating. Then I met a man who wouldn't die. Not because he couldn't be killed, but because he made me question why I should kill him at all." Years turned to decades. Haven grew from settlement to city, a place where Earth technology and Vasarii wisdom merged into something entirely new. Trade opened between them and the more progressive clans. Young hunters came not as outcasts, but as pilgrims, seeking to understand the true meaning of the hunt. Ethan aged as humans do, his hair silvering, his pace slowing, but his mind remaining sharp until the end. When he passed, they buried him according to both Earth and Vasarii customs, his grave marked with symbols from both worlds. The jungle itself seemed to mourn, the ancient trees bowing their branches over his resting place. Kalari lived longer, as her people did, watching their children and grandchildren grow to adulthood. Arya became a leader in her own right, pioneering new ways of understanding between species, between worlds. She established the first academy, where young minds from any background could come to learn without the constraints of rigid tradition. On her 100th birthday, surrounded by 5 generations of descendants and chosen family, Kalari sat in the same chamber where she had once refused to kill. The phosphorescent fungi still glowed softly. The ancient pictographs still told their stories on the walls. But now the chamber was a place of pilgrimage, where young people came to understand that strength wasn't about taking life, but about knowing when to preserve it. A great-grandchild, barely old enough to speak clearly, tugged at her sleeve. "Tell the story, ancient mother. Tell about the hunt." She smiled, her face lined with years, but her eyes still bright with the memory. Once, I was the deadliest hunter on this world. But the most important thing I ever learned was not how to kill, but when not to. Shall I tell you how I met your great-grandfather? How he taught me that surviving takes more courage than killing. The children gathered around, as children always had, as they always would, hungry for stories that shaped their understanding of the world. And Kalari began again, her voice still strong, carrying the weight of truth earned through choice and change. He was meant to be my 15th kill, the final proof of my mastery. But he became something far more important. The first person who made me question why we kill at all. Outside the chamber, Haven sprawled in all directions, a testament to what could be built when people chose understanding over tradition, cooperation over conquest. The jungle had long since accepted the city as part of itself. Vines and technology intertwining in harmony that would have seemed impossible a century ago. In the deep forest, hunting parties still stalked their prey, but now the 15th hunt ended differently. Young hunters were given a choice: the blade or the open hand, death or understanding. Many still chose the traditional path, but increasing numbers laid down their weapons, seeking wisdom in preservation rather than destruction. The change was slow, generational, but inevitable. Truth, once uncovered, could not be buried again. And in the phosphorescent glow of the ancient chamber, as Kalari's voice wove the familiar tale for new ears, the pictographs on the walls seemed to pulse with approval. The ancestors had waited long for someone to understand their true message. The choice had always been there, waiting for someone brave enough to make it. The story ended, as it always did, with the moment of decision. The raised blade, the watching crowd, the choice between tradition and truth. But now the children understood it differently. Not as a tale of rejection, but of rediscovery. Not as betrayal of the old ways, but as a return to the oldest way of all. What happened next? The youngest asked, as they always did. Kalari smiled, looking around the chamber that had witnessed the pivot point of her life. Life happened next. Love. Family. A new world built on understanding rather than fear. Your great-grandfather and I, we chose the harder path. But it led us here to all of you, to all of this. She gestured broadly, encompassing not just the chamber but the city beyond, the merged cultures, the 1,000 small choices that had grown from one moment of refusal. Remember this, little ones. The deadliest hunter is not the one who never misses, but the one who knows when not to strike at all. True strength lies not in following tradition blindly, but in having the courage to question it when it no longer serves. The hardest choice is often the right one. As the children dispersed, chattering excitedly about the story, Kalari remained seated in the ancient chamber. She could feel the weight of years, but also the lightness of a life lived true to principle rather than custom. In the distance, she heard the evening songs beginning, a mixture of earth melodies and Vasarii harmonies that had become Haven's signature. The sound drifted through the jungle, carrying far beyond the city boundaries, reaching perhaps even to the clan territories where young hunters might hear it and wonder about different possibilities. The 15th hunt continued, generation after generation, but its meaning had been forever changed. What had once been a ritual of death had become a celebration of choice, a recognition that the greatest victory was not in taking life, but in understanding when to preserve it. And in the gathering dusk of another day in Haven, as the twin moons of Vasarii rose over a city that shouldn't exist, built on a choice that shouldn't have been made, Kalari closed her eyes and smiled. She had been the deadliest hunter on her world, until she met a man who refused to die. In sparing him, she had found not weakness, but the greatest strength of all, the courage to choose her own path. The phosphorescent fungi pulsed gently, as they had for countless centuries, illuminating walls that held the truth her people had temporarily forgotten. But truth, like the jungle itself, was patient. It waited for those ready to see it, ready to question, ready to choose. And in Haven, city of outcasts and questioners, builders and dreamers, the ancient truth lived on. not in rigid tradition or blind obedience, but in the endless possibility of choice, the eternal power of understanding, and the quiet revolution of those who dare to ask, why? The story was over, but its echoes would continue, rippling outward through time and space, changing everything they touched, as all true stories do, as all important choices must. In the end, Kalari had completed her 15th hunt after all, not by killing, but by choosing life, not by ending a story, but by beginning one that would outlive them all.